Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, whatever time of the day you find yourself tuning in, listening to this message, watching this video. Good day to you. My name is Jerrie'Me Wright, and on today, which is November the 19th, 2020, I needed to get on today and not delay any longer concerning a particular passage whereby God allowed me to receive the language I needed in order to share with you the meditations that were upon my heart over the past few weeks. And I believe the last video that I created was on October the 30th, whereby I was encouraging everyone. That video was entitled "I Voted, Did You?" In that particular video, I was just encouraging everyone to go out and cast their ballot on November the 3rd, which was election day. And I believe sometimes when you have individuals like myself who encourage others to vote, sometimes people may look at that as though, especially if you're a believer or a Christian, people may look at that as though, we're actually trying to put all of our hopes and all of, our faith in one man or one woman or one party over another. And simply, that is not the case. That particular video was basically to encourage everyone with the right to vote to go out on election day or before and cast your vote. That was the intention of that particular video. Nevertheless, over the past few weeks, couple of weeks, I believe going on 3 weeks now since that last recording, I've actually been meditating upon something that I actually shared with someone close to me in the third or fourth quarter of the year of 2018. 2018 was definitely a new year for myself, something new for myself. But in that third and fourth quarter of that year, I was sharing with someone who is close to me, about God being a script flipper. And if you're asking yourself, what is a script flipper? A script flipper is basically what it sounds like. It's just that God is the ultimate script flipper, meaning that God has the ability and the tendency to often flip the script. So anyone who know anything about I guess playwright, there's often a script and there's often a narrative that is created. And sometimes even when we watch movies or TV shows, we might be able to see the direction a storyline or a narrative is going, and all of a sudden, bam, there is a whole shift. In other words, a script flipper is also known, or it could be related to, a plot twist. Therefore, this particular story we see going in one direction, and all of a sudden, there's a sudden change, there's a sudden shift in the story, there's a sudden shift in the narrative. And on Sunday, I actually came home and read Matthew the 15th chapter, whereby I was able to get the language to God being a script flipper. And it was funny to myself because I was sharing this with someone close to me about God actually being this script flipper in that particular season of my life. Now in 2020, in the third and fourth quarter of 2020, as we close out the fourth quarter of this particular year, heading into a new year, Lord's willing, what I come to know and what I come to learn is God is indeed a script flipper. And as little kids, young or old, whenever we're young, we may have this idea of, how we want our life to go, how we want our life to be, where we want to be, and when we want to be there, And all of these plans are fine and dandy, and we might have this thing set out A, B, C, whether it's written down, whether it's in our mind, whether it's on our heart or in our heart. We have this idea whereby we want our life to be a certain way. And all of that, like I said, is fine and dandy. But we must, as believers, come to understand that God is sovereign. God is the ruler. And I know we, as the United States, lean towards a democratic process or a democracy whereby, we, the people, actually have the power to, elevate, someone into power to actually lead a particular nation. But for myself, if I can be honest, I'm more leaning towards a theocracy or a theocratic process, meaning that God is sovereign, not a man, not a woman, but God is sovereign. And because God is sovereign, God will be done. No matter, our plans, no matter how we feel, God will always be done. And in reading Matthew 15, verses 21 through 28, God actually showed me how God is a script flipper in this particular miracle story, whereby he performed for a woman who dared to have faith. Who dared to have faith. And it did not just start it in the New Testament. When we read Genesis, actually, we see that God is a script flipper from the beginning. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I'm actually thinking and considering the life and the story of Abraham. Abraham actually, wanted a child, and because he and his wife wanted a child, God actually gave them a child. Although it was a long waiting process, God did give him and his wife what they so desired. However, in Genesis 20 to 22, we read about God actually asking Abraham to sacrifice his only begotten son, to basically kill his only son. And because God asked Abraham to kill his only son that he actually waited patiently for, Abraham actually acted in obedience. And not only did he act in obedience, he acted in faith. And because he acted in faith, he took Isaac upon that altar and laid him on that altar, and was about to take the dagger to stick in his heart, to stick him in his heart, to stab him in his heart, to kill him and to sacrifice him before the Lord. Nevertheless, there was an angel of the Lord that came and actually said, basically, don't touch the lad. God basically saying, now I know you have faith in me. Now I know you have faith in me, because I believe Abraham's persuasion was, if you actually gave me a child in my old age, if I kill him, I believe you have the power to raise him from the dead. I believe that was Abraham's mentality. Nevertheless, God actually provided at that very moment a ram in the bush. And this particular ram in the bush was provided by God, that he could sacrifice in that place. And Abraham actually called that place Jehovah Jireh, meaning the Lord will provide. And we see that God flipped the whole script, because Abraham was about to sacrifice his son, and Abraham actually, had to deal with that thing within his heart to kill his only son, and he was about to do it. Nevertheless, God flipped the script and said, basically, I know you have faith in me, and because you have faith in me, don't touch the lad, don't touch the child. And he actually provided in that very moment a ram in the bush, whereby Abraham named that place Jehovah Jireh, meaning the Lord shall provide. And we don't only read about God being a script flipper in Genesis 22, but as we continue to read Genesis, actually the 37th chapter, throughout the rest of that particular book, we read about this young man by the name of Joseph, who was 17 years old and had these dreams, and he had these visions, and he actually shared these dreams and these visions with his parents and his siblings, his brothers. And the Bible lets us know that his brothers actually hated him and could not speak peaceably of him or to him because of his dreams. And not only because of his dreams, but because Jacob, his father, actually favored him over the others. Therefore, Jacob actually made Joseph a coat of many colors, whereby to represent blessing, to represent favor, to represent prosperity, right? And the brothers were actually basically envious of him, and they didn't like this young man. They didn't like their own brother. Although he was a half brother, they didn't like him. Therefore, the Bible lets us know they conspired to kill him. Ain't that something, man? It's the people that is the closest to you who are actually the ones who actually can hurt you the worst, because you don't expect it from them. You actually expect that kind of stuff from the outside, but whenever it is in the whenever it is on the inside, that really does affect an individual very differently. Nevertheless, one day he was going to check on his brother as his father asked them, and they conspired to kill him. And Reuben actually stated, stood up and said, we cannot kill our brother. That's our brother. We can actually sell him into slavery, but we're not going to kill our own brother. And what they didn't realize, that God was actually working in a way whereby they didn't even know. They actually hated him. They couldn't speak good of him, but yet and still, that bitterness that they had within their heart, God was going to use for his glory. And I believe that is a good reason why God is a script flipper. God is a script flipper. God is a script flipper, basically, to get the glory out of a life, out of a narrative, out of a story. God is a script flipper. And we see that he's actually thrown into this pit. He's sold into slavery, and he goes through this long journey of pain or whatnot. But yet and still, we read in Genesis, the 45th chapter, I believe, whereby he actually come to see his brothers face to face again. And at this time that he's seeing his brothers face to face, Joseph is actually the second in charge in all the land. And because he was second in charge in all the land during a time of famine, Joseph was in a position whereby he was able to save his family and other generations to come, because he was positioned in the right place. Therefore, what they did, as Joseph said, what you meant for evil, God actually turned it for my good. And that's another prime example of God being a script flipper. But, in reading Genesis, throughout the whole Old Testament, for myself, I am and have always been a New Testament scholar. I love reading the New Testament. I love studying the New Testament, just like the Old Testament. I love the whole counsel of God. Nevertheless, it's something about the New Testament that actually draws me more closer to the Word of God, and I believe it's basically those words in red that always drew my heart to the New Testament. In Matthew the 15th chapter, verses 21 through 28, there's this story. It reads this: Then Jesus went out from there and departed into the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came to him from that region and cried to him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, son of David. My daughter is severely demon possessed. But he answered her not a word. He answered her not a word. And the disciples actually at this point came to Jesus and urged Jesus to send her away, because she cries out after us. And this next verse is when Jesus began to engage this woman who is a Gentile. And Jesus said to her, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshiped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not good that you take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she said, Yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which falls from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith, let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Matthew gospel and Mark's gospel are the two gospels that have this particular miracle story written within the Gospels. Matthew, of course, lets us know that Jesus is actually departing into this region of Tyre and Sidon, and this woman is from Canaan. To give some perspective, Tyre and Sidon is on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Um, Canaan is actually was overtaken by the Greeks and was renamed Phoenicia, whereby Mark actually identifies this woman as a Syrophonecian woman. That's where he gets the name from because it's in the nation of Phoenicia, whatnot. And as we talking about nations, of course, Jesus actually came for the nation of Israel. He came for the Jews. And here is this woman from a different nation who's coming to Jesus and approaching Jesus for a miracle, not for her sake, but for the sake of her daughter who was severely demon possessed. And Matthew actually lets us know that this woman actually identified Jesus correctly. She said she called him first Lord, which means master. So she actually called Jesus master. She's identifying Jesus as master. And then she goes on to say, Son of David. That is important because we read in Matthew 1 1 or 1, the first chapter, we read how Jesus comes down through 40 and 2 generations. And because he comes down through 40 and 2 generations, David is actually one of those generations whereby Jesus came from. And this woman actually knows this, being a Gentile. She's not even a Jew. And to give perspective to this particular story, as we read in the beginning of the 15th chapter, we read how the Pharisees, who are Jews, actually came to Jesus and questioned Jesus about why his disciples were not washing their hands before they ate. And they were so concerned about this. And they actually approached Jesus concerning this very issue. And Jesus responded to them with a parable. And as he did to this very woman, one got it, one didn't. One got it quickly, one actually didn't understand what Jesus was saying. And the Pharisees, asked Jesus the question, why your disciples don't wash their hands. And Jesus says to them, basically, why do you wash the outside of a cup or a bowl and not the inside? It's not what goes inside of a man or a woman that defiles them, but it is what comes out of them that defiles them. So it's not what comes in the mouth that defiles a man or a woman, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles a man or a woman. So Jesus was relating that basically purity is first an inside job. It doesn't matter how good we look on the outside. If we look good on the outside and our inside, our heart is not cleansed. Our heart is not pure before God. It does not mean anything to the Lord. And basically, Jesus actually was already preaching this very message throughout the book of Matthew. Matthew actually wrote in the 5th chapter on the Sermon on the Mount, in the Beatitudes, he said, "What blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." So Jesus is actually proclaiming this message of purity of heart before we even get to this particular miracle story. And the Pharisees obviously wasn't getting what Jesus was preaching and what he was saying to the people. But they were so concerned that his disciples basically weren't keeping up with the laws, the traditions of that particular day and that particular time. Nevertheless, as we continue to read this story, she lets Jesus know that her daughter basically is severely demon possessed. And it is said that Jesus actually departed to Tyre and Sidon, to Phoenicia, basically to escape, basically to be alone with the Father. Therefore, this woman obviously heard of Jesus. Therefore, she actually approached Jesus in faith, and she came to Jesus in faith. But the disciples, in the 24th verse, we read how they, or the 23rd verse, we read how they actually urged Jesus to send this woman away because they felt as though this woman was coming after them. And Jesus answered and said, to this woman, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And Jesus is basically telling this woman, I know my assignment, I know my purpose, I know my destiny, and you are not it. So I wasn't sent to you, I wasn't assigned to you. And because I wasn't sent or assigned to you, I cannot waste my time on you. Therefore, it is important that we know our assignment, our purpose, and our destiny. It's important that we know our assignment, our purpose, and our destiny. And Jesus obviously knew this, because at an early age, he knew this. Even when he told his parents, why are you looking for me? Don't you know? Do you not know I must be about my Father's business? He was letting them know that I know my purpose. And because he knew his purpose, he knew that he was not called to the Gentiles, but he was called to the Jew. He was called not to the Greeks, but he was called to Israel. He was called to the Jews. Therefore, this particular woman, after he said that, it said that this woman came and worshiped him, saying, Lord, help me. Lord, help me. Man, I can only imagine, because there have been times in my life personally where that's all I could basically say was like, Lord, help me, in desperate need of the help of the Lord. And this particular woman, she didn't walk away, or she wasn't deterred by Jesus saying, I wasn't sent or assigned to you. But what the Bible tells us, what Matthew tells us, is that this woman actually came and worshiped him. And that's a place to park right there, because worship actually does something, and releases something within the lives of those who actually worship with a pure heart, pure motives, um, before the Lord. And this woman obviously came to him in sincerity and in purity, even after Jesus said, I wasn't assigned to you. But as we read on, this is the part that that kind of makes the story, for most people who hear this particular passage. Then Jesus answered and said, it is not good that you take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Wow. Jesus said it's not good that you take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Wow. So what does that mean? What is that saying to us? Like, Jesus is not only a prophet in a nation, but Jesus' purpose was a prophet to a nation, and that nation was Israel. That nation is Israel, right? And he's basically saying, it's not good for me to take what is for Israel and give it to the Gentiles, because I wasn't called to the Gentiles. My father didn't call me to the Gentiles. Are you here? Okay. Okay. So her response, is where she actually flips the script on Jesus, and she says this, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs which falls from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith, let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Wow. So, you know, this woman actually flipped the script on Jesus, because Jesus gave this woman a parable whereby, he's saying, it's not good, it's not meat that you take the children's bread, what I have for them, and give it to the little dogs, to give it to those who are non-Jews. And this woman's response is remarkable, because she says, she caught the parable, unlike the Pharisees who he was called to, the Jews who he was called to. This particular Gentile woman actually caught that parable and gave it back to Jesus and said, yes, Lord, I might be a dog, but even the little dogs eat the crumbs which falls from their master's table. So basically, I don't even need a whole lot. I'm not going to be picky. I'm not going to be choosy. I'm not going to be a beggar. I'm just asking you for whatever you have left over. Basically, what they're not receiving, I'll receive the crumbs that's left over. I don't even need a whole morsel of bread. I can take the little crumbs that those children are dropping all over the floor. Because if you ever tend to children before, what you find about children is they tend to leave a mess behind them. And this woman actually is responding in faith on behalf of her daughter and said, Lord, I don't even need a whole lot, but if you can just give me a little bit, I'll be grateful. I'll be thankful. And that's so amazing because this woman's faith actually activated something in Jesus that allowed her daughter to be healed, as the Bible says, that very hour. And God actually flipped the strip in the whole story. And what that means is how he flipped the strip is that Jesus knew his purpose, he knew his assignment, and he knew his destiny. And because he knew all these three things, and he knew he was not called to the Gentiles, however, this woman's faith actually provoked him to give her a miracle because she had faith in God. She had faith in God, and because the Pharisees, because the Jews that he was sent to were actually being so self-righteous that he could not actually do the things that he wanted to do for them, and that's such a shame because this Gentile woman identified it, and because she identified it, she actually received what God had in store for them. And it makes sense why the disciples actually tell Jesus to send this woman away, because she cries out after us. In Matthew the 10th chapter, I believe, Jesus actually sends his 12 disciples out, and in that fifth verse, Jesus tells his disciples, do not go by the way of the Gentiles. I don't want you to go to the Gentiles, but I want you to go what? To the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I want you to go to the Jews. And that was his commission to the 12, and he taught them this in the previous chapters. Now, the disciples is seeing Jesus do something completely opposite, because he told them not to go to the Gentiles, not to enter their land. And now, here Jesus is actually entering the land and the territory whereby he told his disciples not to enter. But I believe and I know that Jesus was actually teaching his disciples a lesson concerning faith, and letting them know and letting them see up front, up close in person, how not only the Jews will be saved, but eventually even the Gentiles will hear this gospel and will receive this gospel with open hearts, and many will be saved, as we see with this woman. And just in closing, I know for myself, I've always had an idea, if not in my head, even written down on paper, how I desired my life to go, the direction I wanted my life to go. But what I've discovered is God often flips scripts. And although we may have our desires, although we may have, an idea of where we want to go in life, where we want to be, what we want to be, what we want to do, ultimately God is a script flipper. And at the end of every day, God has the ability to flip the script in your life. And God has the ability to flip the script in your story. In literary, they call that, if you're reading a book or if you're actually watching a TV show, movie, what we call that in literary is basically a plot twist. A plot twist. And basically, if we're taking that story from Joseph and his brothers for an example, um, Joseph, um, Joseph and his brothers' story is a prime example, because Joseph's brothers were plotting against Joseph, basically, right? So they were plotting against Joseph, right? And they did not know. They may had an idea that this is how it's gonna go, this is how it's gonna be, but what they did not notice was that God was the ultimate script flipper, and that God often tends to twist the plot in the story. So whatever man is plotting, because they actually took that coat of many colors, bloody up back to their father Israel, and showed them the coat like a wild beast killed our brother, and he's basically gone. And had their father weeping over his son, but God had a twist in that plot, and the twist in the plot was actually going to benefit them, the very ones that were plotting against Joseph. And that's often how God works. The people that are actually plotting against you and conspiring against you are the ones that God tends to use for his glory, because at the end of each and every day, God desires the glory in our lives and in our stories, and God will use the very things that people do against us to bring God glory, and even to bring others into his sheepfold. So I just pray that we continue to meditate upon this word, and know that no matter the direction that your life is going now, I just want you to open up your heart and be susceptible to God being able to flip the script in your life, and being able to change up the narrative, maybe not how you desire or you want it to be. And you might be one of those individuals who may be a ABC type of person, a 1 2 3 type of person, and God said, well, I just want to flip this script. I just want to twist this plot a little bit, that I might get the glory out of this story and out of this life. So you continue to take care, be blessed, and ultimately know that God is a script flipper. And not only is he a script flipper, God definitely twists the plots and many of our stories in life. Take care and be blessed. Love you all.